A Bullies embarrass girl at prom. Wrong move, she was a kickboxing champ. Juniper Holbrook adjusted her oversized sweater as she navigated the crowded hallways of Westfield High School, her slight frame easily lost among the sea of students rushing to their next classes. At barely 5 feet 2 inches and weighing less than most freshmen, Junie had learned to make herself invisible since transferring here 3 months ago. Her mousy brown hair hung in front of her face like a curtain, hiding the determined green eyes that most people never bothered to notice. The move from Oregon had been difficult enough without having to start over at a new school in the middle of the semester. Her father's job transfer had uprooted their family just as Junie was hitting her stride back home, where she had been training at elite combat sports for the past 6 years. Nobody here knew about the dozens of trophies collecting dust in boxes in her new bedroom, or the calluses on her knuckles from countless hours perfecting her technique on heavy bags. "Watch where you're going, stick girl," sneered a voice behind her as someone deliberately bumped into her shoulder, sending her books tumbling to the floor. Mackenzie Rothwell stood there with her perfectly straightened blonde hair and designer clothes, flanked by her loyal followers, Brittany Chen and Derek Sullivan. Mackenzie was the kind of girl who ruled the social hierarchy through a combination of wealth, cruelty, and strategic manipulation. Junie knelt to gather her scattered notebooks, keeping her head down as laughter echoed around her. "Maybe try eating something once in a while," Brittany added with a giggle, earning approving nods from the growing crowd of onlookers. Derek, the quarterback who dated Mackenzie and seemed to enjoy tormenting anyone he perceived as weak, kicked one of Junie's books further down the hallway. "Oops," he said with mock concern, his muscular frame towering over her as she scrambled to retrieve it. "Maybe you should hit the gym instead of whatever weird hobby you're into." If only they knew, Junie thought, as she finally collected all her belongings. The irony wasn't lost on her that she could probably take down Derek with a well-placed roundhouse kick. But her father's words echoed in her mind from their conversation the night before the move. "Your skills are for protection and sport, not for showing off or settling scores," he had said firmly. "Promise me you'll only use what you've learned if you're truly in danger." The pattern continued for weeks. Mackenzie and her crew seemed to take particular pleasure in making Junie's life miserable. They would accidentally spill their drinks on her during lunch, mock her second-hand clothes in front of other students, and spread rumors about her being weird and antisocial. The worst part was how the other students just watched, some even laughing along to avoid becoming targets themselves. Mrs. Patterson, Junie's English teacher, either didn't notice the constant harassment or chose to ignore it. When Junie tried to sit in the back corner of the cafeteria to eat in peace, Mackenzie's group would somehow end up at the table next to her, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear their cruel commentary about her appearance and social status. "I heard her dad lost his job, and that's why they moved here," Brittany would whisper conspiratorially. "Look at those clothes. I think she shops at thrift stores." The lies stung more than the truth would have, but Junie remained silent, methodically eating her lunch while visualizing the combination sequences her old coach had taught her. Left jab, right cross, left hook, right uppercut. The mental repetition kept her calm and reminded her of who she really was beneath this carefully constructed facade of helplessness. Everything changed when Marcus Rivera transferred to Westfield in early April. Tall and lean with kind brown eyes and an easy smile, he was the type of person who talked to everyone, regardless of their social status. When he chose to sit next to Junie during chemistry class, she felt her carefully built walls beginning to crack. "I'm Marcus," he said simply, pulling out his notebook as if sitting next to the school pariah was the most natural thing in the world. "Mind if I borrow a pen? I'm still getting used to this whole organized student thing." Junie handed him a pen without making eye contact, but she could feel him studying her profile. "Thanks, Juniper, right? I heard Mrs. Chen call your name during attendance." She nodded, surprised that he had paid attention. Most students had trouble remembering she existed at all. Over the following weeks, Marcus continued to seek her out, asking about homework assignments and making casual conversation that gradually drew her out of her shell. He had transferred from a school in Texas where he'd been on the debate team, and his quick wit and genuine personality made him popular almost immediately. Junie found herself looking forward to chemistry class and the brief moments of normal human interaction. Marcus never pushed her to talk about why she kept to herself, but his presence made the school day more bearable. She caught herself stealing glances at him during lunch, admiring the way he defended younger students who were being picked on, and how he treated everyone with the same level of respect. Mackenzie noticed the budding friendship and zeroed in on it like a predator sensing weakness. "Looks like Stick Girl found herself a boyfriend," she announced loudly during lunch one day, making sure her voice carried across the cafeteria. "I wonder what he sees in her. Maybe he has a thing for charity cases." The humiliation burned in Junie's chest, but Marcus surprised her by standing up and walking over to Mackenzie's table. "Actually, I see someone who's intelligent, kind, and doesn't feel the need to tear others down to feel better about herself," he said calmly, his voice carrying just as well as Mackenzie's had. "Maybe you should try it sometime." The cafeteria fell silent, and Junie watched in horror as Mackenzie's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. She had just made Marcus a target, and from the look in Mackenzie's eyes, Junie knew this was far from over. The retaliation came swiftly and mercilessly. Derek started accidentally shoulder-checking Marcus in the hallways, while Brittany spread rumors about him being desperate enough to date the weird new girl. Mackenzie orchestrated a campaign of social isolation, convincing other students that associating with Marcus would make them targets too. Junie watched helplessly as Marcus's initial popularity began to erode under the constant pressure. He never complained or blamed her, but she could see the toll it was taking. The easy smile appeared less frequently, and he started eating lunch alone after his new friends abandoned him one by one. "You don't have to keep sitting with me," Junie told him one afternoon after Derek had made a particularly crude comment about both of them. "I'm used to this. You don't deserve it." Marcus looked at her with those kind brown eyes and shook his head. "They're the ones who don't deserve anything. Besides, I like sitting with you. You're the most genuine person in this whole place." The compliment made Junie's heart race, but it also solidified her growing determination to do something about their situation. That night, she went down to the basement where her father had helped her set up a small training area with a heavy bag and some basic equipment. She worked through her forms with renewed intensity, each punch and kick carrying the weight of months of suppressed anger and frustration. The announcement about prom tickets going on sale created a buzz of excitement throughout the school. Junie watched from her usual corner as couples paired up and groups of friends made elaborate plans for the biggest social event of the year. She had never imagined herself attending something like prom, but when Marcus appeared beside her locker with that familiar nervous smile, her world shifted. "I know this might sound crazy," he began, fidgeting with his backpack strap, "but would you maybe want to go to prom with me? I mean, if you're into that sort of thing. No pressure if you'd rather skip the whole scene." Junie felt her cheeks burn as she nodded, barely managing to whisper, "Yes," before Marcus's face broke into the brightest smile she'd seen from him in weeks. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to be a normal teenager getting ready for prom with a boy she cared about. Mackenzie's reaction was swift and vicious. "Oh my God, did you hear?" she announced to anyone within earshot. "Marcus asked the charity case to prom. I guess when you're desperate, you'll take anyone." The comments escalated over the following weeks as prom approached. Brittany made sure to mention how sorry she felt for Marcus having to be seen with Junie in public, while Derek started a betting pool about whether Junie would even show up or if Marcus would come to his senses and ditch her. Junie spent weeks preparing for prom with a determination that surprised even herself. She had found a simple but elegant black dress at a consignment shop, and her mother had helped her practice styling her hair. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she could have one perfect night. The Westfield High Gymnasium had been transformed with twinkling lights and elegant decorations for prom night. Junie felt beautiful in her black dress as Marcus picked her up, looking handsome in his borrowed tuxedo. The first hour was magical as they danced and laughed together, temporarily forgetting about the social hierarchy that usually governed their days. "You look amazing," Marcus whispered as they swayed to a slow song, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I'm really glad you said yes." Junie felt like she was floating, lost in the possibility that this night might change everything. She was so caught up in the moment that she didn't notice Mackenzie and her crew positioning themselves near the refreshment table with plastic cups filled with red punch. The attack came during the announcement of prom king and queen. As Junie and Marcus made their way back to their table, laughing about something Derek had said to his date, Mackenzie stepped directly into their path. "Well, well, look who actually showed up," Mackenzie said loudly, her voice cutting through the music. "I have to say, Stick Girl, you clean up better than I expected. Too bad about the rest of you." Before Junie could react, Mackenzie lifted her cup and poured the entire contents down the front of Junie's dress. The cold punch soaked through the fabric instantly, the red stain spreading across the black material like blood. The music seemed to stop as nearby students turned to stare, some pulling out their phones to record the humiliation. "Oops," Mackenzie said with fake concern. "How clumsy of me. Though I guess red is more your color anyway." Derek laughed loudly from behind her. "Maybe now she'll actually have some color in her cheeks." Brittany giggled as she took photos of Junie standing there dripping and mortified. Junie felt the familiar heat of embarrassment and anger rising in her chest, but this time it was different. This time they had crossed a line by humiliating Marcus too, who was trying to help her clean up while shooting furious glances at their tormentors. "You know what?" Junie said quietly, her voice barely audible over the returning music. She straightened up slowly, wiping punch from her hands with deliberate movements. "I think I've had enough." Something in her tone made Mackenzie pause, but the queen bee was too committed to her performance to back down now. "Enough of what, exactly? Are you going to cry? Run to the bathroom like you always do?" Junie looked around at the crowd of students watching the spectacle, their phones still recording, waiting to see how the weird girl would react to being publicly humiliated at prom. She thought about her father's words, about only using her skills when truly in danger. But as she looked at Marcus's concerned face and remembered months of torment, she realized that her emotional well-being was just as important as her physical safety. "Actually," Junie said, her voice growing stronger, "I think I'm done letting you walk all over people." She stepped forward, and for the first time, Mackenzie seemed to sense that something was different. Junie's posture had changed, her shoulders squared, and her stance balanced in a way that spoke of years of training. The mousy girl who had spent months making herself invisible was gone, replaced by someone who moved with quiet confidence and controlled power. "What are you going to do about it, Stick Girl?" Derek interjected, stepping up beside Mackenzie. His size advantage had always been his main source of intimidation, but as he looked down at Junie, something flickered in his eyes that might have been uncertainty. "My name," Junie said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent gymnasium, "is Juniper, and I'm going to show you what happens when you push someone too far." Derek laughed and reached out to shove her, probably intending to knock her off balance and complete her humiliation. But his hand never made contact. Junie's reflexes, honed by years of training, kicked in automatically. She sidestepped his clumsy advance and grabbed his wrist, using his own momentum to send him stumbling forward into the refreshment table. The crash of Derek hitting the table full of punch bowls and snacks echoed through the gymnasium like a gunshot. Students scrambled backward as red punch and food scattered across the floor, and Derek struggled to get up, his tuxedo now stained and torn. "What the hell?" he sputtered, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "You little—" He charged at her again, this time with real violence in his intentions. But Junie was ready. As Derek swung wildly at her, she ducked under his arm and delivered a precise uppercut to his solar plexus that doubled him over, gasping for breath. Before he could recover, she spun and connected with a roundhouse kick to his midsection that sent him crashing to the floor. The gymnasium erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps as Derek lay on the ground, struggling to breathe. Mackenzie stared in disbelief at the girl she had tormented for months, this quiet little mouse who had just taken down the quarterback with moves that belonged in an action movie. "That's impossible," Brittany whispered, her phone still recording. "She's tiny." Junie turned to face Mackenzie, who was backing away with fear replacing the cruel confidence that had defined her for so long. "Size doesn't matter when you know what you're doing," Junie said calmly. "I've been training in kickboxing since I was 8 years old. I've won 3 state championships and 2 regional titles." She stepped closer to Mackenzie, who continued backing up until she hit the wall. "For months, you've made my life miserable. You've humiliated me, spread lies about me, and tried to turn everyone against Marcus just because he was kind to me. I kept quiet because I hoped you'd get bored and move on." Junie's voice remained steady and controlled, but there was steel in it that made several students step back. "But tonight, you crossed a line. You humiliated me in front of everyone at what was supposed to be a special night. More importantly, you hurt someone I care about." Derek had managed to get to his feet, his face twisted with rage and embarrassment. "You're going to pay for that, you freak," he snarled, pulling back his fist for another attack. This time, Junie didn't just defend herself. She moved like a dancer, flowing around Derek's clumsy attempts to hit her while delivering precise strikes to pressure points that dropped him to his knees. A quick combination of punches to his ribs, followed by an elbow to his shoulder, sent him sprawling again, this time with genuine pain etched across his features. "Stay down," Junie commanded, standing over him with the poise of someone who had spent years perfecting their craft. "I don't want to hurt you more than I already have." The gymnasium had fallen completely silent, except for Derek's labored breathing and the distant sound of music from the speakers. Every student in the room was staring at Junie with a mixture of shock, fear, and grudging respect. The girl they had ignored or mocked for months had just systematically dismantled their social hierarchy with nothing but skill and determination. Marcus appeared beside her, his eyes wide with amazement. "Junie, where did you learn to do that?" She turned to him with a small smile, the first genuine one she'd worn in months. "Elite combat sports back in Oregon. I've been competing since I was 10. Mackenzie was pressed against the wall, her earlier cruelty replaced by genuine terror. "You're crazy," she whispered. "I'm going to tell everyone you attacked us." Junie looked around the gymnasium at the dozens of students holding phones, all of whom had recorded the entire confrontation. "Go ahead," she said calmly. "Everyone saw who started this. Everyone saw Derek attack me first. All I did was defend myself." She knelt down beside Derek, who was still on the ground holding his ribs. For a moment, she could have delivered a finishing blow that would have completely broken him, could have made him feel the same helplessness and humiliation he had inflicted on others. Instead, she extended her hand to help him up. "I could hurt you a lot worse than this," she said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough for Mackenzie and Brittany to hear. "But I'm not like you. I don't enjoy causing pain." Derek stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment before accepting it, allowing her to help him to his feet. The gesture spoke louder than any threat could have, demonstrating a strength of character that his years of bullying had never shown. "I'm sorry," he said, the words barely audible. "I didn't know." "That doesn't excuse what you did," Junie replied firmly. "But it's a start." She turned to address the entire gymnasium, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. "I want everyone to understand something. For months, you watched Mackenzie and her friends make my life miserable. Some of you laughed, some of you joined in, most of you just stood by and did nothing." Students shifted uncomfortably as her words hit home. "I'm not angry about that anymore because I understand. You were scared of becoming targets yourselves. But from now on, things are going to be different." Junie walked over to where Mackenzie was still pressed against the wall. "You have a choice to make," she said quietly. "You can keep trying to rule this school through fear and cruelty, and I'll be there to stop you every single time. Or you can learn to treat people with basic human decency." Mackenzie's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" "An apology," Junie said simply. "To me, to Marcus, and to every other student you've targeted this year. A real one, not some fake performance." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Mackenzie finally spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry for everything. The names, the rumors, all of it." Junie nodded, accepting the apology, even though she could see it would take time for Mackenzie to truly understand the impact of her actions. She turned back to Marcus, who was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Want to get out of here?" she asked, gesturing to her punch-stained dress. "I think I need to change clothes." As they walked toward the exit, students parted to let them pass, many still recording with their phones. Junie could hear whispered conversations starting up behind them, the story of what had happened already spreading through social media. "I can't believe you've been hiding this the whole time," Marcus said as they stepped out into the cool night air. "You're like a superhero or something." Junie laughed, the sound lighter and freer than it had been in months. "I'm just someone who got tired of being pushed around." The following Monday, Westfield High School was a different place. The video of Junie's confrontation with Derek and Mackenzie had gone viral over the weekend, shared thousands of times with captions praising her for standing up to bullies. Students who had never spoken to her before approached to express their admiration and support. More importantly, the culture of the school began to shift. Mackenzie, humbled by her public defeat, stopped her campaign of harassment and began the slow process of trying to make amends. Derek, nursing both physical bruises and a severely damaged ego, avoided Junie entirely but also stopped picking on other students. Teachers who had previously turned a blind eye to bullying behavior suddenly became more vigilant, inspired by a quiet girl who had shown them what courage looked like. The administration even invited Junie to speak to younger students about standing up for themselves and others. Junie found herself at the center of a social circle for the first time in her life, surrounded by students who genuinely wanted to be her friend, rather than just associated with her newfound fame. But the relationship that mattered most was with Marcus, who had stayed by her side through everything. "I keep thinking about that night," he told her as they sat together during lunch a few weeks later. "Not the fighting part, but the moment when you decided you'd had enough. That took real courage." Junie looked around the cafeteria, where students from every social group were talking and laughing together in ways that would have been impossible before prom night. "I think everyone has that moment in them," she said thoughtfully. "Sometimes you just need the right push to find it." She had learned that being strong wasn't just about physical ability or winning fights. Real strength came from knowing when to stand up and when to show mercy, when to fight back and when to help others find their own courage. The quiet girl who had once hidden in oversized sweaters was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true power came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The trophies in her bedroom were no longer gathering dust. Junie had joined the school's martial arts club and was teaching other students the same skills that had helped her transform her life. But more than that, she had become a voice for those who felt voiceless, proving that sometimes the most unlikely people could change everything. As she walked through the halls of Westfield High School with her head held high and Marcus by her side, Junie Holbrook had finally found her place in the world. Not as the invisible girl who hid from conflict, but as someone who stood up for what was right, while never losing sight of who she truly was. The girl who had once been dismissed as weak had shown everyone that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful weapon against cruelty is simply refusing to accept it anymore.